Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Tech Can Save Us podcast brought to you by Literal Humans. I'm joined again today, this is part two, by Gary Bonilla, and we're going to talk about how leaders actually use AI for strategy. And as we all know, Gary is the co-founder of Goodmora. Welcome back, Gary.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. It was such a rich conversation that we needed to bring you back and
I
bring you
know.
back
I'm
in
kind of
person.
honored. You don't get a second part in podcast sometimes.
We don't normally do that. So you're a special honored guest. Just to bring folks up to speed, if you haven't yet watched part one of our conversation with Gary, please do go check it out because it's going to be important for you to understand that to follow along in part two. But just by way of background, we covered a lot of ground in the last conversation, and we discussed why so many business transformations fail. We talked about the limits of intuition on its own, and also how AI can help leaders see what's really happening inside their businesses and stop guessing and just like get down to it. So for those who haven't listed, please make sure you check that out. What we want to do today is talk about, how we build on that conversation. So that first conversation was about mapping the system and kind of uncovering the hidden dynamics that were, inside organizations. This one's about what comes next. So looking at leadership, decision making, and how behavior changes with like better data and better insights, which is what you're doing. So let's start there. Let's dive in and talk about strategy as play and not control. You returned several times in the last episode to this idea that play is important in complex systems. So why does play matter so much right now? And it sounds like we're in a tough time. So like play isn't necessarily like in vogue, I would say, but arguably it's needed even more. So how does AI enable that kind of exploration and playfulness?
So I actually do think it's the right time for play.
Yeah.
Let me just start by saying that because the speed to market is so incredibly fast these days.
Yeah.
By the time that and this is, we talked about this, by the time that you finish a transformation, let's call it the standard way, most likely it's going to fail. Forget the reasons, the fiscal reasons they give you for it. But in general terms, it will fail. This is obsolete by the time you do it, right? And any study that you see is been collecting data from CEOs or C-suite, and in conversations with C-suite, they will tell you that. It's like, I have to do it, I have to go through it, but I know at the end, it's going to have to start all over again. So play becomes really important, right? And what AI does is that very quickly and efficiently sets up the stage with a lot of binary clarity. That's really important, very binary clarity. So you know what is a yes, what is a no, what's a number and what's not a number. So then you can really open the space for creative solutionizing. Let's call it that way. And that's where play begins. And I find as a decade-long strategist, right, that the firmer the data and the analysis that you have, the more playful the actual solutionizing is. It's also really great in times where most companies, and I would say even for all of those who have called back their leadership and their employees back into their real estate space, right?
Yeah.
Even those still see that it's not the same dynamic anymore.
Right.
Even within offices that are sitting in the same building, Zoom has taken over.
Yeah.
People don't walk to a room to meet anymore.
Right. Yeah.
There's not that, people don't think it's necessary. So to be able to create a space where you can actually sit down with people, right? To use AI as a tool that enables you to open the time and the space to physically get together and have a conversation makes a difference. I know that's not something you want to hear from an AI guy.
Yeah.
But I do think that in one of our most recent work in the Middle East, we saw that. And we saw the C-suite saying, I need to understand much more clearly what's happening because I don't have time to delegate some of the analysis anymore.
Yeah.
So they even want to get into play as well.
Yeah, and so like people are just like, we're having this like return to office, and people are showing up saying, oh, if you just get everyone in the same room, it's going to sort of, it's going to help us, have better collaboration and creativity and strategy. You're saying like not necessarily unless the underlying sort of insights and data and
are the right ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you in the pre-COVID days how many of these meetings that you just described I went to, and they just become a big to-do list. You have to leave and meet again 17 times to actually get something done. And what we've seen with the work that Goodmora does is that we constantly see people get right into action. Once we, most recent work with an NGO in the United States, the moment we output the analysis and the recommendations, we sat with the board and it was a work session.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it started as thank you for the provocation. We have to digest this because it's quite hard
It's
hitting,
confronting.
right? It's
Yeah,
confronting,
confronting.
right?
Yeah.
But we just kept talking through it, and an hour later, there had been a full-on work session, and they worked out of it with a work.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you about strategy because, like, it's something you and I talked before the show. It's like a space that we're moving into more so. I think we've been actually like doing it, but just not charging really correctly for it, and
You
not
should.
yeah, like not standing in our power and kind of realizing like the value of what we were delivering. It's kind of like yeah. Here's some strategy, but like what we're really doing is content and SEO, and it's like no, like it should be the other way around. Or it seems to me the strategy is like shifting from like trying to kind of lock in on what in that moment feels like the perfect answers, even though we all know there's no such thing, and it's shifting to being adaptable without kind of losing coherence and continuing to do that. So do you agree with that? And if so, like, what do you think is causing this shift? Or what do you think in general is causing the shift in how people are thinking about and executing strategy?
So when in doubt, go back to history. And I think it's interesting to understand when strategy took a real big shift.
Mm,
And that's when the barcodes in
okay.
product. Did we talk about this before?
Yeah, I think you might have mentioned.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the barcodes came out, right? Because it began to tell strategies that you can go specifically down to a product and a behavior associated with one product,
Right,
right?
right.
And then that's when, so the Brits,
Yeah,
where we sit today,
yeah.
are famously known for awesome strategy, right?
Yeah,
Really
interesting.
good, rigorous strategy.
Yeah,
In the US, you always want to find British trained strategists,
interesting,
right?
interesting.
Because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
bring a thoughtfulness and a rigor to it, and it comes from that era,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I think that that's the first thing that
yeah,
we need to know. However, those strategies were very much based on past,
yeah,
on
yeah.
past behavior, past data. We were totally okay with getting omnibus data that was a year old. That
Okay,
was
okay.
amazing.
Yeah, wow.
That's not the case.
We need real
It's
time.
real
Yeah,
time
yeah,
with what we are doing and other companies are doing, not as good as us.
yeah, of course.
Is the idea that you can actually, by looking at a sequence of past behaviors in corporations,
Yeah,
you can extract the data from that behavior,
yeah.
and you can actually predict other companies' outcomes and behaviors,
Right,
right?
right.
And
Okay,
that's where strategy is right now.
okay.
It's much more in a space of forecasting and predicting
Yeah,
with data that really supports a story, finger on the air,
yeah.
kind of like, let's now turn off the rigor and turn on my intuition, right?
Yeah.
Intuition continues to be
Yeah.
important, of course,
Of
at
course,
the end
yeah.
of the day. But there's so much good data now that really allows strategy to be much forward looking as opposed to diagnostic only.
Interesting. I have so much more to say about data, but I want to talk about leadership and like how important in particular, and this is something I think about a lot, Gary. Like this is something that keeps me awake at night is kind of the CEO's role in, an AI enabled organization and how that's shifting. You said last time that the era of delegation heavy leadership is coming to an end. It's like your Bill Clinton moment, the era of big government.
Yeah.
Say what you will about that one. What should CEOs and founders now be personally involved in, would you say? I'm sure it's going to vary from organization to organization. And where should they maybe take a step back, or where should they still step back? Like, obviously there's going to be a lot of variation. Help us understand at a general level how leadership needs to change, and the whole what got you here will get you there piece, in this AI enabled era.
I think until now, or maybe until 2 years ago, it was very easy. And remember, you and I speak to CEOs almost every day, right?
Yeah.
And it was very easy to get away with delegating
Yeah.
all the innovation part.
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for the time that the innovation, and I'm going to say AI because that's limiting, but the innovation folks that enter the company some sort of capacity at a senior level eventually stepped up into CEO roles, right?
Yeah.
I think CEOs need to embrace understanding innovation. They need to embrace understanding technology, and we talked about that a little bit last time. In the particularly in the consulting world, the technology and the innovation guys sort of came as external consultants halfway through the thinking to sort of guide a little bit of the sexiness of what you were going to show. They didn't necessarily mean that it was going to be reflected on the work.
Does that mean the CEOs and like they need to become more detail oriented about the innovation agenda, about how the tools work, about what they it's interesting you mentioned that because we had Steve Clark on here from and they're building an organization called Tech Leaders Connect, or kind of a network, I should say, and it's the largest gathering of IT leaders in the UK, maybe one of the largest in the world. And they talk a lot about that, about how the CIOs and CTOs need to be at that, C-suite executive table, and how they need to be working much more in concert with CEOs and founders now. So it's just interesting synergy of like what they're seeing in the market for CIOs and CTOs and what you're seeing in terms of, hey, CEOs need to be more technical leaders. Yeah, interesting.
I mean, some conversations with CEOs, they assume or they understand. I understand why, but they know about tech.
Yeah.
The answer will be, oh, we're really good friends with senior management at Meta, so we know.
Oh gosh.
Or
Okay.
we, and that's good.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
good context.
Yeah.
But that doesn't substitute understanding really what the technology can do for your organization and for your
Right.
company.
Right.
Technology used to be a back-end function. It's not anymore.
Yeah. So does then you're gonna like this because this connects back to play, but like does if they know the technology really well, the technical bits, does that give them the permission or the opportunity to be more creative and more playful?
That's right.
But also more efficient as well? Do they need to be more efficient as well? Like talk me through that.
I would say, sorry to not pick
It's
any
okay.
of the two.
No, give it to it, yeah.
I think what's going to enable is to bring much more relevant people to the table.
Much more relevant people to the table. Okay, say more about
right?
that. Yeah. I
So
agree with you about
so
yeah.
less people that are thinking about to-do lists that need to be completed.
Yeah.
And people that are actually thinking about the implementation of those things.
Okay.
It's very easy, not as much. It's beginning to happen. The conversations in our boardroom include conversations of activation and implementation.
Interesting. Before they were much more okay.
Yeah.
Why is that happening? How about our audience understand why that's happening at that level now?
I mean, this is something
Yeah.
I believe
Yeah.
that when you're having technology so embedded into every output that we need to achieve these days,
Yes.
that unless that's included in the conversation from the get-go, it's going to be very slow for an organization to implement, or the implementation on the output still going to be very divorced from the technical reality we have today. So I'll give you two very quick examples, and I'm going to try to anonymize as I speak. I've sat with a really big agency that just went through mergers and acquisitions, and their entire conversation around technology is already embedded in the boardroom. So the valuation actually came from that effort, as opposed to the effort of creative awards or traditional case studies. But I've also sat with independent agencies, branding agencies in the US that are doing fantastic, beautiful creative work, but they have know nothing about technology. And I can tell you that halfway into the meeting, I tell them, here's the entire gap of everything. And the KPIs that you set up for yourself are going to take us twice as long.
Because you're not seeing this dark matter. This thing that's impacting your, it's super interesting.
Which is not visible unless you know technology.
Exactly.
We're talking about micro targets and micro environments and all those things that technology enable you to get to. If you're living in the world of traditional thinking or media or traditional strategy thinking, you're just seeing the surface and the outside expression that the mass gets, the general audience gets to see. You're not seeing the specific niches of audiences and how they're interacting with.
Interesting. We were just talking about this today. We're doing a positioning workshop later today, but like, how do you look at the macro environments, and then also look at the category and the consumer and the, the company, and like get that really right, and almost look at each like, in a vacuum, and then pull it all together to get those like insights. And when you're doing brand positioning, and you're sort of saying the other element to bring in is like the technological impact and how that is going to impact any sort of brand positioning or go-to-market work that you're doing. If you're not thinking about that technical side of it, then you're missing a whole chunk of the pie there. So
I mean, a good analogy for the ones that don't I don't think anybody that's listening to this doesn't know about technology. But if there's anyone out there, I think a good analogy is the old B2B and trade approach to branding, marketing, and business transformation. Was very much about very signals that were available to everybody.
Exactly.
And now you're beginning to see, I mean, Riverside, right? The platform we're using for this is one of the ones that, unless you're really involved in this space, I mean, they're quite well known, but unless you really know the space, you'll never hear from them.
Exactly.
So they've got the magic down. How is it that they're using technology to communicate with their audiences?
Right. Interesting.
And that's just scratching the surface.
Exactly. I want to talk about like culture and fear and kind of like the human side of AI. And, we know that fear and sort of resistance of, to AI is not irrational necessarily. There's some really rational reasons. So like, tell me how this shows up inside organizations and what you've seen that actually reduces that fear and that worry about AI as folks are making these transformations.
So I'll start by saying that the last year I've seen the fear subside. Very quickly. I think I started last year saying the innovation is faster than adoption.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Okay.
think now we're adoption stepping up a little bit.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And you have leaders that are beginning to say, no, we need to know this, right?
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
need to talk about it. And for a while, you have the Duolingo approach, which is we're just going to get rid of everybody unless you know AI, you're not here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite drastic.
Now they're pulling back, like Klarna's whole thing.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's beginning to balance itself
Yeah.
out. I think that that balance in practice is mitigating some of the
Yes.
fears and
Yes.
some of the
Yeah.
risk. And then also, you're beginning to see most of the platforms talk about human AI collaboration. So
Yeah.
interesting. They used to talk about everything, words matter. They used to talk about AI and human collaboration. They talk about humans and AI collaboration.
Yeah.
And you're seeing perfect examples around
Yeah.
this. And, you know, that's beginning to see, but I think it's early days.
Yeah.
I think it's incumbent upon founders and CEOs of organizations like yours and like mine to in practice show that we're actually creating a new space for human to develop new talent and
Yes.
new capabilities.
Yeah. I think that like L&D piece, learning and development piece is crucial, right?
Yeah.
And sort of like we're now looking at, our sort of network of freelancers we work with, but also potential full-time hires and saying like, why do they actually want to come work here? And like, what are they learning? How are they growing? How integrating AI tools into their practice to make them better and help them focus on the things they really want to do and not the minutia. And like, you kind of have to like build that employer, value proposition and,
Right.
and make it really clear and say like, look, we're not using it for replacement. We're using it for augmentation.
Right.
And I think I haven't seen, maybe you have you seen companies like do a really good job of clarifying that and saying like, look, you should come work here because we use AI and like, here's all the benefits.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. But what you are seeing is C-suite saying, so we talked last time about three levels of AI, right?
Yeah.
From the chats to all the way to the more
Yeah.
specific like ours. You are beginning to see a little bit more trust on the larger LLMs because they are working hard to get some of the, and there's different models within the larger LLMs now that allow you to have a little bit more of in the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
But we still haven't seen anyone say, oh, this, unless you're an AI company, you should come here because I'll let you use AI.
To that point, like, I mean, I think it's really interesting that you haven't seen any companies like, do a good job of crafting that, employer value proposition with and around AI. So that's like a conversation I want to carry on because we're seeing that pop up in like we do a lot of work in HR tech. And so like, AI tools for upskilling managers to be better managers, things like that, giving them data to help them become better managers. And how do you pull that, synthesize that? Hey, so here's some insights about how we've seen, one of your team members perform. Like, take that into your one-on-ones. Like, there's so many opportunities there, I think. But I want to talk about this conversation about like speed and quality. I think you said last time, and you warned about not confusing speed with progress. Right. So going back to that conversation about leaders, like how can leaders move quickly without sacrificing that quality? How can they move with intention, but show, okay, we're moving at this pace, here's the pace, here's why, but we're never going to sacrifice the quality of our outputs.
I find it very difficult when I sit with potential clients or partners who ask me, so what's your efficiency play? It's the first thing they say.
Yeah, of course.
It's the first question I
get.
get. Right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
How do I squeeze more out of that?
Yes, but it should be a combination of factors, not just efficiency. And I always have to say, well, so far we crunch time at 90%, which is great. But then I step on that immediately and I say, what we rather do is make sure that we're sitting with your entire organization, understanding who needs, and I'm going to go back to something I said before, understanding who needs to sit at the table. Right? Because the machine can speed you up, but people also need to be knowledgeable about it and be able to have applied conversations early on.
Right. Yeah. I want to look forward to talk about, no one ever asked this really, but like what leaders will regret not doing right now. Like, so in this moment specifically, and you're sort of like at the cutting edge of it, like leaders leveraging AI to, upskill their teams, but also to produce better strategy, their better sort of brand, brand positioning. We're having this conversation again in 2 years, and we will have you back in a year or two, maybe sooner. What do you think most organizations will regret not doing right now? For example, treating AI like a tool instead of, I guess a keystone for culture shifting. What are the things like you need to really be thinking about this in 2026 specifically, because you're going to be kicking yourself come 2027 if you don't.
Well, the genie's out of the box.
Yeah.
So to continue having a conversation that's only about efficiency and about workflow
Yep. Yep.
organization, it's really not productive anymore. That's
Okay.
happening. That's a function. I think it's okay still to think of AI as a tool.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have
Sure.
a recent client who just said, we're trying to convince her very or that didn't believe in what we were
Yeah.
doing, and she just sold it as a tool, right? And that's okay, but they quickly realize it's much more than a tool, right? It suddenly becomes like when Bloomberg came out and everybody like had the Bloomberg terminal or the
Yeah.
LexisNexis terminal, and
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm just gonna find that information, the legal one for you or the business one for you. Those things we can really embed it. No one would walk into a meeting without actually having
Right.
that information. So the same thing will happen with AI platforms,
Yeah.
right? And then companies are going to begin saying to employees,
Come
we
here.
have a
Yeah.
very smart way of using AI. Your work will be so much more creative here.
Yeah.
It will be so much not only quicker, but it will be grander.
That's super interesting. Like, and what's to be gained from that? I mean, I guess just like my sense is that like the like Netflix obviously has sort of pioneered this whole talent density thing, but like my sense is that like that's going to become even more critical and kind of like distilled into various sectors and ways folks are thinking of like now I need like the most talented senior dev who can leverage AI
Right.
tools for coding and then upskill a team to do that as well. Like it's going to become even more, I think, acute, and ironically, the human stuff is going to become even more important, more critical. Um, as the tools rise and as the sort of value prop of the tools gets clearer for folks is my sense.
Yeah, and I was just listening to what you and I were just saying. So I used to have a boss that used to say that I was too much of a thinker.
Thinker.
Right? Thinker.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Thinking for the sake of thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think at the first time I was like, I was very angry.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, I own it. I think it's great.
Yeah.
But just for people to know, this is not a thinker conversation. This is actually stuff that's happening. And I'm going to go down into the weeds, which is if you have a CEO that cannot tell the difference between how an LLM is working and what a knowledge graph can bring to an internal AI proposition in a company, then they don't even know how they're moving forward in terms of innovation and how they're going to invest of their
because it's about understanding the landscape. You know what I mean? Like what ground is the company sitting on, you know what I mean? And how does that affect our strategy and our motion? Because if you can understand, okay, and I love what you said earlier about like how those activation and even like the tooling conversations have moved up, that's now become critical. You cannot be this sort of like high level.
And previous generation CEOs really don't want to have that conversation because they feel it takes a lot of time and that shouldn't be what they're thinking about.
It's not my.
But it really is a strategic conversation these days. And that's why I brought up that very minimal example, very sort of downstream example of like things like knowledge graphs, because it just makes a lot of sense for CEOs these days to understand this the same way they understand different business terms and the implications they have in the business.
Yeah, the landscape is shit. I think it'd be a really interesting conversation. Maybe bring someone on here who's involved in like training and support for executive teams and stuff like that, and actually have a person.
It's a great company called Manageable.
Manageable.
Do you know them?
I don't know them.
So they sit at the intersection of virtual coaching and AI coaching for senior and mid-level executives.
Interesting.
And they're exploring this right now. They've done really well. That startup, they started, talking about their positioning in terms of AI training and all those things. So there will be very interesting.
All right. Well, hear that, Manageable, that you've been recommended onto the pod by Gary. So let's get them on here. Let's jump in. We got a couple minutes left. Let's jump into the quick fire questions, which we promised.
This wasn't a quick fire.
No. This was. We got so much more out of this. Quick fire. I'm going to hold you to it's just a quick sentence, and I see your answers here already. You've done your homework. If you could found another tech startup, what would it be and why? And I see you got one of my favorite sectors mentioned here.
I don't know. I don't remember what I wrote there, but I'm going to say without reading.
Yeah, do it.
Education.
Yes. And so you said that helps people see structure in their own decisions and knowledge consumption.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Why that specifically?
So most recently, I was a chairman of an NGO called Aprender UK. And Aprender is
to learn, right?
I'm sorry?
To learn, right? Spanish? Yeah.
To learn, exactly. But they're actually not even related to Spanish.
Okay.
They do teacher training for geographies where the government, either they're very remote or the government cannot afford to train teachers.
In what countries?
Africa, Brazil, Middle East,
Interesting.
So
I would love to have them on and talk to them.
They're great.
Yeah.
They're really great. So what we did the last 2 years is that we figured out a way to create black boxes that we could download stuff and move it. And now we're moving into what's the role of AI into feeding this content for teachers. So my head is like, this is a great place. I mean, if I had to start over again, this is what I would do.
You and me both. Let's talk about Aprender because I want to hear more about that. This is kind of a two-sided question. What tech invention excites you most? And I think you mentioned the graph stuff earlier. And what concerns you the most in terms of a tech invention right now? Flip sides, show you your answers there.
Let's see. Well, I'm probably going to have a different opinion now.
That's okay. Yeah.
Definitely, I'm a fan of graph database. That's not new.
Okay.
It's been around, but I
Yeah.
just love the application right
And
now.
explain to our audience what a graph database is. Yeah.
So I'm going to do my weird explanation that I tell people, but then they get it when I say it.
Yeah.
So imagine it's a fishing net,
Yeah.
right? That has all the different like strings and
Yep.
the little nuts in between the strings,
Yep,
right?
yep.
When you throw a fishing net on the water and you pick the fishes, right? It kind of takes a different shape,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Depending on
yeah.
the fish you're getting or
Yeah.
the type of fish or whatever. So it's the same thing. It looks at the data and it grabs all the data. And as you ask a question of how can this company be more AI centric? This is a very generic question for the sake of it. And it grabs the data to begin to put it in place.
Yeah.
It takes a different shape and the organization begins to show itself differently.
interesting.
You can
Yeah.
visualize it and say, this is what the organization looked like before.
Yeah.
This is what it's going to look like in 2 years based on the questions and the data that you provided.
We need that. So let's talk, because we're literally, like, you asked me some questions earlier, which I loved, about like, hey, how's the the repositioning going and the sort of evolution of your business model, Literary Humans? And I'm like, well, it's like, first of all, it's hard to, like, to your point, visualize, right? It's hard to, like, wrap your head around and understand, okay, first of all, this is where we've been and this is our current state right now, and this is where we'd like to go. And using a tool like that, I think, would be really valuable.
Yeah, I'm really bullish about it because I think not only where we are, but in many other innovation spaces, it's a great visualizator.
And then the flip side of that, what concerns you the most? What tech invention right now is like, oh, that kind of worries you?
I hadn't thought about that, but the first thing intuitive that came to mind is all of them, because it just depends on what hands it's landing.
Yeah. It is.
I'm a little bit. Oh, someone's screaming.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit concerned by what some of the larger cloud players like Amazon and Tesla. Tesla is actually a cloud.
Okay.
I think there's those, as they're so big and there's in such a well-funded testing space for technology, that there is complete disregard for human interaction with it. So that's the only thing that really concerns me. Whenever you kick the human out of the process.
Yeah.
Call me old-fashioned, but
human in the loop.
Yeah.
It's
I know it's such a cliche to say it now, but it's true.
it is true. It is
Because
true.
we will move beyond this sort of
this
risky, scary phase,
Yeah,
right? And
totally,
then we'll be
totally.
left to like, so now what do we do? And we would have wasted 3 years of retraining people in new capabilities,
Yeah.
creating new types of jobs.
What an interesting cultural moment too. You have the people pushing for, like, stop hiring humans, like, get them out of here. Like, we want to be as efficient as possible. And then you have people who are scared by that, who are kind of like, well, yeah, I'm being told that you don't need me as much anymore, and the tech itself is scary and things like that. And what you're saying is, like, we're slowly moving away from that, where those efficiency, sort of pirates are like, oh, okay, actually we need to, like, dial it back a little bit. And other people are sort of lifting their head up being like, actually they still do need us, and this could help me. And, like, I think that's a fascinating cultural moment in terms of how things are shifting there.
And you have people like Andrew Spence.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know who he is.
Please tell us.
He's a HR specialist, HR machine specialist.
Okay.
But he's got a really good platform to talk about this. This whole thing is about how do we now rethink human in the space. Then like him is like gathering a bunch of other thinkers around that are building it and actually building processes for it.
Yeah, interesting. Close this out here. We're just talking about humans. Who is a literal human who's been integral to your career journey that you'd like to shout out?
So many. First comes to mind.
Yeah.
Angel Collado Schwartz. And he'll probably never listen to this.
Oh, send it to him.
He was CEO at Saatchi Latin America for many years.
Okay.
My first true mentor. Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Who really believed back then in the power.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And
it's cool.
It's thanks to him that I moved from a traditional strategy space to an innovation strategy space.
Interesting. And now you've, like, sort of fused the two.
And if he ever listens to this, he knows this. I love him. He's not very warm and fuzzy, but there you go.
That's all right. What's an inspirational quote that's guided you through your journey in tech and innovation?
Thoreau.
Yeah.
Do you know which one's,
I mean, I loved Thoreau. I loved Walden. I loved that,
It's pretty amazing. We would be running naked through the forest.
Yes. Wordsworth, right?
Going the directions of confidently in the direction of your dreams. Always live the life you imagine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's
been what I've done since I was born, even before I knew that quote.
Yeah, and it shows too, like, with the way you sort of carry yourself, what you're building, and the way you talk about, how you're sort of supporting leaders nowadays. It really does. So thank you for sharing that with us.
you.
So we'll close out there. As we close out, I keep coming back to how this conversation and the last one really reframed like how we're thinking about strategy in this moment with AI and tech. And like I think what you're building, something that we hope to engage with, but it's really inspiring. And I think it kind of gets underneath some of these arguments that people are making that are frankly, a little bit short-sighted and ridiculous about, how scared we should be in the tech or, going all in, but you're sort of saying we got to have good tech that is, smartly constructed, but keep the human in a loop and help them, augment and improve what they're doing. So really appreciate it.
I want to leave with a couple of things.
Please, yeah.
Just one thing. Year and a half ago when we started and I reached out to a bunch of strategists, even people in the innovation space, they all either never answered or when they answer, like, but how is it going to change? How is it going to substitute my work? That's the question, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And then this morning at 6 a.m., I started with a call with a friend in Australia from strategies, also a mentor. And his whole thing was like, I just love what you're doing. And I think we need to figure out how to make more of this. And I'm like, amazing. But what's happening in a year and a half? The humans are now not afraid anymore.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's also something to be said for time. I was reading one of like Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb. He collected all the rejections that he got, from all these investors and stuff like that. He just put them on a board and everything and sends it out every once in a while.
I mean, I've gotten to a point that I think in this particular space, you and I sit, no is a really good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, no, I tell the sales team, I'm like, I love a no. I love a quick no. I love a hard no because it tells me where to put my energy and where not to. So I say to them, let's get as quickly as we can to a hard no or to a hard yes and just move on with our lives, because we spend so many time in these conversations like placating each other. It's like
also the rationale behind the no's are really great ways to optimize what we do.
Yeah, good data, good feedback, absolutely. So, well, thank you again for coming on, Gary.
Sure.
Thanks everybody for listening. It's been another great episode of Tech Can't Save Us podcast. Please, as always, give us a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us bring on more great guests like Gary Bonilla, the CEO and founder of Goodmora. Thanks again, Gary.
Thank you very much.